everyone. Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast, where we chat openly about creativity, personal development, and building a career in the arts. I'm your host, Michelle Manette.
And I'm Robyn Lester.
This is episode 30, and today we are going to be talking about stories. We're going to kick it off with our little check-in. So each week or each episode, we share a win, a fun or interesting thing, and something we appreciate. Robyn, did you want to kick it off?
Yes. I have a win for the first time in weeks. A friend of mine got married recently, and I had offered to do the flowers for her wedding. And I have a tendency to overcommit myself. So I thought that it was going to be fairly easy and straightforward. It ended up being fairly easy and straightforward, but I was definitely very stressed. I was definitely kind of putting it off too, because I was like, I don't know what to do. And you feel the pressure of making them look nice. But I also was using plants from my mom's garden. So it's, early September, not a lot of stuff is flowering right now. So you're kind of what am I going to do that makes these things look nice without having to buy a bunch of cut flowers?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so the win was that I managed to make 15 very lovely flower arrangements using primarily stuff that was growing in my mom's garden or my dad's yard. And they looked awesome.
Awesome.
So there we go.
Do you have any pictures that you can maybe drop in the Discord?
No. Actually, I have one picture. That's a lie. I have 3 or 4 pictures, but 3 of them are in the garage, so it looks very dark and dingy and they don't look good. And the one picture, I do have one picture but you kind of don't see. So I got this pampas grass stuff to put in it, and the one picture that I have in good lighting you don't really see the grass, which was my favorite part of the whole thing. But anyways, so it was fun. It was a little anxiety inducing, but in the end it all turned out well, and it was a lot of fun to do. And I think I'm going to become a flower person. What are those people called? Florist. There we go.
So do you want to then grow the flowers, or are you just interested in arranging them? Or maybe you
I just want to. No, I just want to arrange them. I don't want to grow them.
Or maybe they don't grow them. Maybe they just get them sent in. I don't know.
Probably different.
I don't know. I know little to nothing about flowers, so don't quote me on any of this.
Yeah. Anyways, if anyone's getting married and needs someone to do their flowers.
Why not?
I'm joking.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
The pressure would be, because I did my own flowers for our wedding, but it wasn't as intimidating because it's the only person I'm letting down is myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine having to do these for people that for clients. That would be very stressful, who have actual color themes and a vision.
Yeah. Could you just experiment on your own time and just make yourself little flower arrangements? Just to have put it on a table somewhere just for your own enjoyment. And then maybe if you get the confidence, you can just even if you just do that for friends and family, I think it's a nice gesture whenever you can offer sort of your creativity to be part of somebody's big day.
That would be fun to actually just start doing little gift arrangements for people.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of that before. Cool. And then my something fun is that I discovered a new video game. Did I talk about this last time? No.
Is it that Disney one I keep seeing you pop on Steam to play?
Disney Dreamlight Valley. Yes, that would be it. I love that you see me. That's embarrassing. I got it last week and I've already put 50 hours into this thing.
Impressive.
It's addictive. It's very fun. It's soothing my inner child. Well, it's cool because you get to make friends with all the different Disney characters. I just unlocked Anna and Elsa from Frozen, and Olaf too. Anyways.
Did you ever play any of the Kingdom Hearts games?
No.
You might like that because it's very Disney heavy.
Oh, don't give me more. Don't give me more games to play. Oh, man. But this game is pretty fun.
Nice. So you get to befriend Disney characters, but so what's the plot? Is that it? Or is there a story?
There is a story. The story is that your character is dropped into this Disney Dreamlight Valley, and there's been this like curse that has taken over, and you're having to unlock different like biomes and unlock different characters, and your mission is to get to the root of like what caused this curse and then to lift it.
Okay.
And the curse causes all of the characters to kind of like forget who they are and forget what this valley even was. So you're kind of like helping the characters remember at the same time. It's a lot of just running around and fetching things for people that's kind of the quest style, but it's the unlocking part that's like super addictive. You just want to keep, and there's like, you know, you can grow crops and upgrade your house and upgrade other characters' houses, and you know, like that classic sort of world building stuff.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character that you've unlocked so far?
Hold on, I feel like I have an answer to this question. Oh, Stitch.
Oh, nice.
He's so cute. Sometimes I just go talk to him just because I like the sound of his voice. It's been a stressful couple of weeks at work, so this game's been a really, really like soothing escape.
I know exactly what you mean. Like I've played those kinds of games before for sure, and it's such a relief when things are really stressful, just to like, especially, you know, as we talked about in the nostalgia episode, just when it pulls you back into your childhood. I mean, it's such a beautiful escape.
Yeah, I'm excited because there's Beast and Belle to unlock as well. I haven't gotten there yet. Yes, I'm quite excited about those two. Anyways, highly recommend for anyone looking for a video game to get into. It's super easy. There's no like combat or anything. It's like a stress-free game, but it can get a little tedious too.
Yeah.
But kind of like a good game to listen to a podcast, like our podcast, perhaps.
There you go.
While playing, you know, you can get away with that.
I love games like that.
And I think that is also the thing that I appreciate this week too.
Awesome.
Or these past couple of weeks, just like having something to escape into.
Yeah.
And something that is consuming, but not so much so that like during my workday, I'm not like, oh, I just really want to play the game. You know, I'm able to put it down, which is nice. Because I don't like that when you're just itching to get back to a game. I like to feel like I can live without it.
I know what you mean. Yeah, awesome.
Your turn.
Yeah, my win is that I finally did my first round of cleaning of my filing cabinet after years and years of saying, like, I gotta do it. I was like so glad when I first got it. I'm like, no more putting stuff in binders for me. But then everything just got kind of shoved in there. And so it was always a pain to try to find something. So now everything is in order in the sense that everything has its own folder, everything has a place. So the next sort of set of tasks would be to go through each folder and organize things more. I actually do need more folders. But right now it's nice to be able to open it and like have a slot for everything. And I know some things I'm going to have to go in and just get rid of them. Like there's some old hydro statements from when Mike and I lived together. I'm like, I don't think I need those anymore. So, but I just like shoved it in there for now. I'm like, I'll deal with it like the next round. So I think that might be one of the next things I do is like going through and determining like what can like absolutely be thrown away and then disposing of that. My fun / interesting thing is that I am having yet another rewatch of Parks and Recreation. One of my all-time favorite shows. I think it's probably top 5.
I also have another fun, interesting thing.
Add it at the end. We can never have too much fun, interesting stuff. I haven't watched that show in a little while. The last time was on Netflix, but I canceled Netflix, so it was just not an option. But it's for years been one that has just been like one of my go-to. But it popped up on Amazon Prime, so I'm not moving through it as quickly as I once would have, where I'd like play it on my phone and like watch all the time. Like it's just like it's mostly a weekend thing, and sometimes in the evenings, like probably once we're done when I have dinner, I'm gonna watch an episode. But yeah, it's nice to have something I can default to that's like just a fun time, just like an escape. And the thing I appreciate right now is just like the nice, cool weather. Like I love autumn; it's my favorite season, and today, the first part of today was a little bit cooler than I would like, especially because they still have the AC set up. So there's like the hose leading out the window. And so there's like a bit of like a gap and it made it quite a bit cooler. I should probably just get that sorted. But still, like yesterday especially, I was starting to get that feel of like, oh, I just like want to put a blanket around me and have a cup of tea and like play a game and light a candle. And like that to me is like perfect fall activity. Yeah. So that's it. Let's hear your other fun and interesting thing.
Well, I think I told you this when I saw you on Saturday. I've just finished watching season 3 of The Morning Show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fun show. Like, it's a drama, but highly recommend for anyone looking for something to watch. It's quite engaging. Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon are like phenomenal in it. And season 3 had John Hamm playing this really like sort of twisted billionaire character. Anyways, he did such a good job. I'm super impressed with the writing on that show. And yeah, super solid watch.
I'll watch just about anything with John Hamm in it. He's so great. He's such a great actor.
He's so versatile, because it's like Mad Men, but then I think of him in Bridesmaids too. Like, he plays the comedy or he plays the drama. Yeah, super versatile, great actor. It's interesting with him too, because I don't think he got into acting until he was like in his 40s.
Oh, wow.
And he was a teacher. He was a high school teacher, and he taught Ellie Kemper.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now you'll have to fact check me.
I will.
But I'm fairly confident that is how it worked.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were on Kimmy Schmidt together.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So on to our main topic, stories. Did you want to kick it off?
I guess I'll start. I looked through your notes to try to get ideas for myself. Haha, I cheated. And there was something you'd marked down, which I thought was interesting because I feel the same way. You had written that you don't actually think of yourself as a storyteller when it comes to writing music, which I thought was really interesting because like I was doing a quick like little Google search about like storytelling and art. And one of the things you kind of see, it's like all artists are storytellers. And my first thought was exactly that. Like, I don't think about myself as telling stories through my work. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really interesting that you felt the same way. And I'm like, what is that? That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think for me, because I think so much about lyrics and think about how my lyrics compare to those of other musicians. Like, there are some musicians or some songwriters who I would absolutely say like that is a storyteller. So somebody like Johnny Cash. Like, that is a man who tells stories with his songs. But I don't think that way. And maybe, you know, I'm definitely, I feel like I could be convinced that every artist is a storyteller if somebody gives me a good enough argument. But what I feel in my heart is I'm not necessarily trying to tell a story with my music. I'm generally trying to share an emotion or an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my songs do trend a little bit more towards like what I guess you could call a story, but very rarely. Like maybe one or two songs that I've written out of the many, many, many dozens. So yeah, that's always this thing that I've been thinking a lot about is maybe there needs to be that intention there. And I'm reading this book right now called The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. And it's really interesting because it has me thinking about, you know, how I write songs. And I wonder if that's something maybe I could think about, like, as I'm writing songs. It's definitely, like, I do think in terms of, like, the structure of a song and, like, the arc of the story, quote unquote. But I wouldn't ever say, like, oh, I'm a storyteller. It's like, I want the song to make logical sense, but not all of them do. Some of them are just, like, essentially boiled down to, like, word salad. But, like, it makes sense to me in the context of the emotion I'm trying to convey or the idea.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm thinking, for me, one thing I learned about myself is with songs, I never actually notice the lyrics. Like, I do. In some cases, I'll remember the lyrics, but I don't visualize them in my mind like I would if I was reading a book. Like, they don't hit me the same way. And I'm more aware of the actual music
Same.
versus the words accompanying the music. And so it's always interesting to me talking to someone. They're like, oh yeah, like I love the lyrics of that song. And I'm like, I'd never actually really noticed.
I'm the same way when I'm just listening to music. If I want to learn a song and do a cover, then I'll learn the words. And for some songs, like, the words kind of stick out. But yeah, it often takes me like many, many, many listens for the lyrics to start to penetrate, because I'm so music heavy, which is funny because I was actually the opposite when I was younger. I could, listen to one of my NSYNC albums and like know every single word. And, my dad would like pick up his guitar and, try to pluck out the chords. He's like, I think I know what's going on here. But he wouldn't know any of the words. I wouldn't remember any of the words when he tried to like sing along to it. I'm like, how is that possible? How can you listen to a song and not pick up the words? And now I'm very music heavy, even if the songs I write, I put a lot of time and attention and care into my lyrics, but I'm very music forward. It's all like, for me, music is the ultimate ruler and the lyrics are there just to support the music.
Right.
And so it's definitely something that, with the exception again of some artists, like I think some artists you kind of can't help but really hear the lyrics. And sometimes that has to do with, how a song is arranged. So something that maybe has a very sparse arrangement where the vocals are very forward and maybe the lyrics are very clear. That is something that I'm going to notice a lot more. Sometimes it's just the nature, again, of how an artist approaches writing songs. If they are somebody who's maybe like writing like acoustic driven music, where again, their vocals are a little bit more forward, that can, really have an impact. How somebody sings too. So sometimes, there's, the very common experience of just mishearing lyrics, because when you sing a word, it really changes the way it sounds, which is why you can get away with some really odd rhymes, because when you sing them, they make sense. So if you're trying to like write a poem and you want like a very, very tight rhyme, you wouldn't, you'd want to have like dark and stark. You'd be very like clear about the lineage between those rhymes, whereas when you're singing, man, you can get away with some stretches just because, and different artists can get away with different stretches, likely because of how they sing. So like for me, I know how I sing words, and so it gives me that chance to like play around with words that will fit within how I like sing vowels and stuff. So it's a long-winded way of saying I'm in the same boat. I don't pick up lyrics immediately.
I feel like that's a missed opportunity for me, though. I feel like my experience of music would be more rich if I had an awareness of the images that lyricists are trying to paint while they're writing songs, right? It's too bad that I kind of miss out on that world of music, I guess.
Yes, but also I think your experience with music, if that feels good to you, I think that's completely fine. But if you wanted to explore some lyrics, you just pick like some of your favorite artists and just try to pick out what's happening. I mean, this is part of active listening, where you listen to a song, and this is actually an exercise I used to do quite a bit, and I actually do want to get back into, where you listen to a song and you try to listen for different things each time. So you could listen to a song and go, I'm going to listen specifically for the lyrics. And you can find lyrics too, so if you can find them online, although online lyrics are not always like the most accurate. So if you have access to like a CD that has the lyrics, that's, I think, generally the better option for accuracy. But, even if you just get something that gives you a general idea, it can really help reveal something about the story, which is really interesting if you have a song that maybe the music and the words don't match in terms of the emotions. So maybe you have like a really happy sounding song, but the lyrics are like devastating.
Yes.
Sometimes you get, and it's really interesting because I'm again swept up by the music first. And so then you learn what a song's about and you're like, oh, interesting. Like I wouldn't have guessed that based on like the feel of the music.
Yeah. I like when they do that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point about the passive listening. And I think for me, when I listen to music, I'm not actively listening, I'm passively listening because I'm doing something else at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you do enough of that, it would get to you. So if you were listening to music while you're playing your Disney game, if you listen to the same album enough, stuff is going to start to pop out. Like inevitably the chorus, the lyrics are probably going to stand out quite a bit. And then you listen enough times and you're going to start to catch, parts of the verses and all of that. So yeah, there's also something to be said for just exposure. Enough repetitions, you are going to kind of pick out certain things. And again, that's where I tend to get to with a lot of songs, unless I go to actually learn them. And in which case I do, go and take the time to learn and memorize the lyrics. But yeah, it might be a fun activity for you to try. Just like pick a song and give it a few listens and just see what you can pick out and see how it makes you think about the song after.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that kind of popped to mind with storytelling is just how old of a tradition it is.
Absolutely.
And like predates writing. And was it a critical tool in terms of cultural development and even just keeping humans safe, right? Like you learned through those cautionary stories what to do and what not to do. I mean, when you think of like the kind of ancient folklore stuff, like a lot of it is very dark. But it had a part to play. So it's interesting. I feel like it's one of those things we sort of take for granted nowadays, because storytelling is just all around us. But it is interesting when you kind of actually think about how essential storytelling is to like the development of society today, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the whole reason we have writing is because people wanted to write down their stories, because it was passed like through oral tradition, but at some point somebody decided like, hey, let's get this written down, because then we can spread these ideas. And maybe that also aligned with, people traveling to different places and all of that. I'm not a super big history person, not in terms of like, I'm very interested in history, but I don't know enough about history to be able to verify any of that. But I feel like vaguely I recall like that, being the catalyst for why we now have writing, was to pass on these stories.
Yeah, like the mass production of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was thinking a bit too about storytelling as an art form is really quite a beautiful thing. But then thinking about how it's now, when I think of kind of like storytelling, I just immediately think of how storytelling as an art form has kind of been taken and used for sales purposes. Like to pitch, we tell a story. To sell, we tell a story. And just kind of made me feel a little bit sad. I mean, obviously storytelling still exists in its like traditional form, but just, I don't know.
It's always challenging to see something really meaningful be co-opted just to make money.
Yes.
And you understand why, because it's so effective. And this is what I'm learning from this book, the science of storytelling, just like how our brains are really designed to tell stories and, resonate with stories. And so it absolutely becomes this very effective tool for marketing, which is wonderful when you're somebody who genuinely wants to make a connection and wants to add value to the world. But there's definitely the kind of corporate capitalist, empty storytelling. Like, we're going to tell this story, but it's like just to make our shareholders more money. And then it feels like
it's manipulative.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there is that concept of what is like the hero's journey. Like that's a story arc that has existed forever. And so I've always been fascinated by that doesn't matter what time period you live in, like that hero's journey, the trajectory of that kind of story arc is always appealing to us. There's something in our brains that like we really gravitate to that kind of story. And so I hate that like marketing experts have sort of grasped onto this and are now using that to like trick us into buying stuff that we ultimately probably don't need.
Yeah, I think that again for me is my hang up with anything where somebody is being sold something they don't need. Especially if the story is like, you feel bad, but you'll feel great if you buy this product or whatever. It's going to fix all your problems. So I think the opportunity for people to be taken advantage of is very high. Something I've been thinking about, since we first talked about doing this episode was like, what's the value or purpose of telling a story, and like, why does it resonate so much with us? Why do we keep coming back to stories? And of course, like you brought up, like, it's something that was effective in keeping us alive and like being able to have these vital lessons, written into the DNA of a story that was passed down. But, and I suppose you're going to have some of that to this day as well. You're going to have, different lessons that are taught and all of that.
Well, and shaping culture too, and shaping cultural identity and all of that stuff is storytelling plays a huge part in all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the first notes I wrote was that stories help us connect to and make sense of ourselves, others, and the world. Because the world is, I mean, it's pretty chaotic. And as we've discussed before, our brains really don't like chaos. Like, we don't like the unknown. We don't like things that don't make sense. And so it sort of feels natural for us to want to group things in such a way that it follows like this clear narrative, so that we can easily connect the dots. It makes something feel familiar, makes it feel like, oh, I can control it. And this is something Will Storr talks about in the book, The Science of Storytelling, that our survival depends on like learning how to control people to get what we want. That's how our brains evolved, because originally it was like our methods of survival were about like fighting and all of that and being stronger. But as human beings started to settle and we started having these societies, these communities, the people who were able to reproduce were the people who got along with other people. And so that's what our brains are now programmed to do, is understand other people so that we can essentially like get what we want. You know, to understand how a human functions. So we have this like endless curiosity about other people and all of that. And there's this interesting thing that Cal Newport brought up on an episode of his podcast, talking about how reading fiction can actually improve people's empathy. And I feel like there was a study, an actual study he was drawing from.
Sounds
I'm going to have
familiar.
to, yeah, I have to look and see if I can find it. But I thought it was really interesting. And, you know, I think, you know, especially for folks who are really into like self-development and all of that and personal growth, you know, the temptation is, and certainly I fall into this category, the temptation is to focus a lot on nonfiction, on the stuff that's really going to like move you forward. But it often comes at the expense of fiction. And I'm really finding myself being drawn to a lot more fiction these days, partly because it also is a great way for me to get more reading in. I find I read nonfiction books very slowly because I take notes and all of that, but I'm really enjoying getting lost in a story and like feeling that connection with people, and, you know, being able to get inside the head of somebody else. It sort of scratches a different itch.
Mm-hmm.
And this also is what lets us live, not literally live, but like experience all of these different lives, these different lifetimes. So, you know, I'm never going to know what it's like to, you know, go to space or meet an alien or, you know, whatever, slay a vampire, but I can put myself in the headspace of a character who does those things. And because your brain is actually structuring that world, like it's different than sitting and watching a show or a movie, because it's being created just in your mind.
Yeah.
And so there's like this different level of connection you have when you are conjuring this world as you're reading each page. And so it gives you this really interesting personal experience with these different lives, because no two people are going to imagine it exactly the same way, because it's always going to be informed by our own experience and just how our brains happen to default. I get this sometimes where I'm reading a book and I'll have an image in my mind of like what somebody looks like or what a place looks like, and then a description later in the book kind of like counteracts that. I'm like, no, that's wrong.
I hate when that happens so much.
Like I just read a book recently, and like the two main characters, one of them is blonde and one of them's brunette, but I had them mixed up in my head. I'm like, nah, it's wrong. So that really threw me off. So every time it's like one of them's like blah 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 and her blonde hair, and I'm like, no, wait, no. And I was like, oh, that's right. No, my brain was like determined to stick with its initial image of these two people.
It's funny because you get so attached to your initial image that you, and isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
There are bonds that are formed with these characters that we're reading about.
Yeah.
And it's similar, I mean, that's similar to, it makes me think of how people feel about like a painting that really speaks to them. Like there's a bonding that happens. I think the same with like music that really calls to a person. There's bonding, and, you know, and then the artist puts out another album that is completely different. And then there's that kind of like, why, you know? And it is that there's this tie to the art form that is quite interesting and very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's going to be a big part of what helps to develop that empathy too, is that you feel this deep connection with these characters, which is, I'll talk about this a little bit later if we have the time, but, reading in the Science of Storytelling, talking about how important character is, like even more so than the plot. Like a good plot, like you need to have a good place for the character to live, but like we're so driven by people and their stories and their flaws that, yeah, you just, to develop compassion and care for a character who doesn't exist, like I can't imagine that not also then helping you to cultivate some more compassion and empathy for people you don't know, but maybe at one point in your life would have judged. But you go, well, maybe I can take a step back and sort of question like what's going on, and maybe just acknowledge that I don't know what's going on in their head, and maybe you can give them a little bit more grace than you would have otherwise.
Well, it kind of, reading exercises that kind of imagination muscle.
Yeah.
And I think imagination is pretty key with empathy.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah.
You need to imagine what it's like to be someone not yourself, to tap into that empathy, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Stories will also give us some examples of like the lives we could live. So, you might watch a show or, listen to music or see a painting or have some experience with some kind of a story, and you feel the resonance of that somewhere. And it could be something like maybe you read a book like Walden by Thoreau and you're like, oh, I think I'd really like to have like a really simple life, And so the things you learn about yourself from the stories you hear can actually, if you're intentional, if you think about it this way, you can actually use that to inform how you move forward in life, because it can reveal to you things that are important. And maybe, you can start to notice patterns about like the kinds of stories you're drawn to. So if you're really drawn to like a lot of stories about like travel or living in a certain area or doing a certain thing, that can kind of be like a little bit of a red flag to say, oh, maybe there's something here, or maybe there's something about this. Maybe it's not the thing specifically, but maybe there's something there that just there's that resonance, and you can use that as a way of maybe bringing that more into your life. And it's the kind of thing you wouldn't have known if you weren't interacting with these stories.
It's funny that you say that, because I was thinking I'm often drawn to stories, like historical stories. I'm like, what is that telling me?
Time to go to the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah, go back in time.
Yeah, and so you could ask yourself, like, yeah, what specifically? Because yes, you cannot go back in time at this point. Who knows? But yeah, and it might be something like, oh, I like, if there's something about it that feels simple. It's a time like long before phones and that level of distraction. And if you dig deep enough, you can figure out what it is. And it could just be that you like it. You're like, it's so different than the life I live. I just like to escape here, which I think is another one of the valuable pieces of a story, is that, and we were talking about that with your Disney game, with me rewatching Parks and Rec. There's like this comfort, and again, this ties into like nostalgia big time. Just the comfort of something, familiar and something predictable and fun and like good, maybe, and like knowing if you reread a book series or something and there's a happy ending, like just the comfort of like knowing that how it's gonna end, and especially if there's like good characters. So it's like when you connect enough times with a story, you tend to almost feel like you have this relationship with these characters. Like, which again is something like I think Baldur's Gate 3 specifically has going for it big time, because the characters that are your companions are so well developed that you can't help but build this emotional connection with them. And they're such a huge part of that experience and the fun of that experience, and that you get to develop like through your character this connection and relationship with them, and a lot of that's determined by the choices you make, and in the case of Baldur's Gate too, like based on the roles you make. So you get like, you could get a different iteration of the character each time. It's like you get different parts of them that are revealed to you, so it feels almost like getting to know a person, where you have to put in the effort to like really figure out who they are and all of that. But yeah, anyways, one thing too is a story can help you to feel less alone, or help you feel understood or not broken. So just hearing somebody else's story, you know, like the number of times you'll hear somebody tell this like story of their life, and then people will be like, I thought I was the only one. Like, I feel so relieved to hear that somebody else has had this experience.
Yeah.
You know, which is like the idea behind like the importance of representation. So people being able to see themselves and their stories and their experiences represented, you know, authentically and with, you know, grace and compassion and kindness, like it really helps people to just feel like, okay, I'm okay. Like I'm human. Other people have had this as well. And, you know, I don't need to be fixed. It's, you know, there's that comfort in that camaraderie. And also I think too, like that ties again back into like the empathy, where if there are more stories, more voices, people who haven't had those experiences will, and this is like more talking, I guess, about like nonfiction, if people are writing like a memoir or whatever. Like I love memoirs because I love hearing about people's lives, and it's crazy how different some people live, but I love that. I love learning about people, and of course you could do this with fiction as well. You write a story and it's a life you haven't experienced, but yeah, the more, you know, broadly we are able to connect with these different stories, you know, the more we have this opportunity to sort of open our minds and open our hearts to people in the real world. Yeah, I think this ties into what I wrote here. Allows us to feel and to be human. So allows us to connect to our emotions, because, you know, we really, I believe anyways, you know, that we're really here to like experience the full range of emotions, and stories are a great way to tap into that, you know, because when you have a really epic tale, for example, like it's going to take you through, you know, myriad emotions, where it's, you know, the thrill of adventure and the devastation of defeat and like the sadness of somebody dying, or, you know, the fear of like facing evil. And so you sort of get to experience these emotions, this whole range of emotions, which is like that. It's just that reminder, like, oh yeah, I'm alive and I'm a human and I feel things. And sometimes it's nice to tap into that, especially like when you're somebody who tends to live in your head a lot. I think when a story can bring you back into your body, I think that's a really special thing.
I don't know if I've ever experienced that before, but I think I primarily read as a form of escapism.
Yeah, and so maybe that is just a reflection of like the stories you read, which again is fine if that's more what you're into. And I know there are a lot of people who won't want to read or experience stories that like make them feel things. I mean, it's like the idea behind like trauma and stuff like that. So certain people who have had traumatic experiences aren't going to want to like have to have that feeling come up again with the whatever they're consuming. And so yeah, it's good to then avoid that. But for me anyways, that maybe that's just like a personal thing, but I like.
No, it's interesting though. I've only read one thing where it kind of engaged me emotionally. I mean, there's, you know, if I'm reading a book and some like there's a sad part, I'll feel sad. But like there's only been one book that I've read that really kind of like brought up some emotional stuff, and like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I know there are some books. Some of the people I follow who are super into reading have recommended some books where they're like, oh, this book is amazing. Like, it's going to mess you up for a few days, but like, it's really worth the read. Oh, so like, I have some of those tucked away for like when I'm in that kind of emotional space. Like, I haven't really been in that kind of headspace for the last several months, but now I'm feeling so much better. I feel like, oh, maybe that's something worth exploring. Because actually, I do want to go get a library card and start getting stuff out of the library. So I'm going to go with a list and maybe try a bit of a like a emotionally challenging book.
I don't know if I have the capacity to read something that would be emotionally heavy. I don't think I'd be able to. So on my last read through of Harry Potter, which was early COVID, I couldn't finish the series because it was the first time where I couldn't finish the series because it was just too heavy. And I haven't, for whatever reason, like I'd never found it too heavy before, but for whatever reason, I mean, I'm sure we
for
can
whatever reason
determine what the reason was.
I'm sure something was going on.
There must have been something going on, yeah.
Yeah, or even just like, again, I'm thinking like stories, books, but obviously it's related to any kind of story. So if you're watching a riveting Netflix drama and it's like got a lot of stuff that's really heavy, it's sometimes you just can't
do it.
You're like, I'm not in the right headspace for this, which is, I think it's completely healthy. I think, it's, you definitely want to be starting from a good, healthy, emotional place before you dive into some of those depths, but they can be great when you're ready for them.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to watch something that's emotionally heavy, watching a film is easier than reading a book.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's shorter, it's sort of ripping the Band-Aid off. But it's I'm kind of thinking like that, circling back to the stories is helping us kind of build empathy. It's so true. I hadn't really fully appreciated that before. I'm thinking how much of who I am is informed by the stories I've consumed growing up and stuff, right? And this awareness of things outside yourself, outside your own immediate circle, that if it weren't for stories, we would never really be aware of. We can't experience everything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like there's a quote from an author about, somebody who reads like lives 1,000 lives before they die or something like that.
Yeah.
And again, I would extend that. I think when you have the quality of the media out there now, I think a story consumed by television or whatever, I think it's just as good. Or video game or whatever, I think the quality is just as good. So stories are also a great way to help us understand something, usually, through showing rather than telling. They can challenge us too. Again, that's going to depend on the kind of book you read. So it could challenge you emotionally, intellectually, physically, I guess, if it's a really, really big book. Actually, you know what? Mentally, if you read like a big book in terms of like something really dense, there's those sort of books that are like a challenge to read. That could be a thing as well, or a really long movie.
I'm just like trying to read Tolstoy and keep track of all the different characters. Yeah, that's. Have you ever tried to read War and Peace?
No, I haven't. It's like on the back of my mind is one I'd like to attempt at some point.
I should try again. Last time I tried, I was in high school, but I just could not keep the characters straight.
You need like a character sheet.
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's all I could think of at this point. But I'm sure there are like lots of benefits to stories. But I also wanted to talk about some of the pitfalls of storytelling.
Oh.
Or what I think are some of the pitfalls of storytelling. Because the fact that our brains love stories gets us into trouble.
Oh, yes, because of the stories that we end up telling ourselves.
Yeah. So this is like stretching storytelling beyond like existing media and literature and all of that. This is more like, okay, well, telling stories is great, except in a lot of cases, it makes it hard for us to be able to separate, fact from fiction, fantasy from reality. Because we can tell ourselves these stories that are just, straight up not true. Or people can tell stories too. I mean, that's always the thing as well, is not every story that's been put out there is true. Some of them are like deliberately written so that, like, you have like satire, I think is a good example. Like, and some people who are maybe not as media literate can take things at face value when they shouldn't be.
Right.
So that, I mean, that's maybe that's a little more specific to just people who are susceptible to that kind of thing. But I would say also, the stories that we tell ourselves that just don't serve us, I think is a really big one. This is something I'm personally wrestling with right now. So I, as I've been doing, like I've talked about doing all this emotional work and kind of trying to work through some stuff in my past, I hit a point where I realized that I was continuing to tell myself these stories of like, how I've struggled and how things have been unfair, and like, and it had gotten to the point where like I use the term like I was arguing for my limitations. So I kept finding myself feeling like I was just saying, well, this is hard because of this, and this is hard because of this, and it's and I hit a point where I realized like, oh, this story is not serving me because it's making it difficult for me to do the things I need to do to get myself into a different place. So like our stories can keep us stuck in these cycles. This is like the idea of somebody playing the victim all the time. So, it's again important to acknowledge like where you've been harmed and like work through that. But there does have to be a point where the story you tell is something a little bit different. So like for me personally right now, I'm trying to more embrace like the parts of my story that feel like they'll help me move forward. So be able to say, I'm capable, I'm resilient, I can figure this out. And I can look back and tell stories about, my past that do amplify that. And it makes it easier for me to now take action and do something different. And then that helps to amplify and give credence to that story. To be like, oh, look, I'm doing the thing now that does align with this version of myself I'm turning into a story. And you can tell stories about how, you're great and nothing needs to be fixed and there's no problems here. In reality, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed. And sometimes that's like something you're telling, a story you tell yourself. Well, I mean, I'm sure I've done this particular story. Like when you're trying to tell yourself, like, everything's fine, it's fine. And it's really not fine. And it's not helping you to acknowledge the stuff that has to be fixed, which can be harmful to other people in a lot of cases, where if you have a family, you have kids and stuff, and you haven't dealt with your stuff, it's that generational trauma. And I thought too about the idea of, because we are so programmed to create stories, sometimes we can waste time trying to write a story to understand something. So I think not everything in our life is going to make sense or going to have a nice tidy package, and
that's it.
So you'll spend all this time like trying to like figure out this puzzle, but there's nothing there, and it's just, you're just wasting your time trying to make sense of something that cannot make sense, or is that it's too nuanced and too complex for any one person to really understand. So it's like better to not waste your time trying to make sense of that.
It is interesting because as you were talking, what I was thinking of, like, we consume a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And what is also interesting is that I think we have a tendency to try to make our life into a story.
Mm-hmm.
We try to find what's the through line, what is the overarching theme. And I think that's why we start to talk in terms of the stories that we tell ourselves are sort of on theme.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we kind of fall into that trap. But even like when we think of just our life trajectory, we sort of think of it as a very linear kind of story.
Yeah.
Which is not how life actually is. And I think we make choices to try to fit into a linear progression.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I was thinking, throw social media into this.
Yep.
And the stories that you can tell about yourself and your life through social media. And then you start to get into the dark side of storytelling. Because what we're doing is we're telling stories about our lives on social media that are it is a story. It is a narrative. It is constructed. It's not actually super authentic.
Yeah.
There's probably elements of authenticity there and elements of truth, but there's a lot missing as well that we're not
lying
seeing.
By omission. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what I find really fascinating, is just this, how our brains are so wired that story function is like a drug to our brain. We want everything to fit nicely.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of drive ourselves crazy a bit.
100%.
And now we have a mechanism, social media, in which we can tell our stories the way we want to tell them.
Yeah.
There's more to unpack there, but I find all of that really, really fascinating.
Yeah. You brought up a great point with social media for sure, because that is storytelling. It's like this projection of the life somebody wants other people to think they live. But it also makes it then difficult for us to really connect with somebody, because we tend to connect through the places where we're vulnerable, which does require that authenticity.
Yeah, it's in some cases storytelling of the worst kind, because it doesn't serve anyone except for the person telling the story, which at its root, storytelling was about giving to the larger community. Like,
it's a very
people
generous
around
act,
you.
or it can be.
It is a very, it can be. It can also be like, I mean, there's lots of ways in which it can be weaponized too, right? But some of the storytelling I think that people are doing through social media is a self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all guilty of it,
of course.
Right? And I shouldn't say like it's self-serving has such a negative connotation, but because I do think that ultimately it is just people trying to make sense of their own lives. And where I'm at right now is this kind of trying to embrace that life is just is just weird, and I'm trying to be more in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think part of that involves rejecting this idea that my life has to follow some sort of linear trajectory.
Yeah. Yes. It's like not trying to logic your life.
Yeah.
Like let it happen. Yeah. And definitely, I mean, and to sort of tie it back to what you were saying about like weaponizing it. I mean, I think we see that, you know, when as people are trying to boil something down that is nuanced and complex and making it black and white, like good versus evil, you know, that kind of thing. Like, oh, this is happening because of this, like cause and effect. This is something that he talks a lot about in this book, how we're always looking for like what caused this thing. And this is what like sends people down the road of conspiracy theories, because they want easy answers, because there's that discomfort in not understanding, or like in things like, let's say like people's lives are not going well and somebody's like, well, I have this really easy answer, it's because of this, and it's like, no, it's more complex than that. But it gives somebody that sense of relief, and it gives them like a mystery to solve too, like, you know, I guess depending on your flavor of conspiracy, there's a sense of like, I want to know the answer, and somebody like, often there's somebody like dangling the answer, like, I know it, but you gotta like, you know, follow us and do this anyway. So yeah, it's definitely, and I mean, and beyond, so that's like taken to an extreme, but I think in general, and I mean, I'm certainly guilty of this too, where it makes you look for the story in somebody, and you're like, okay, are you the good person or are you the bad person? When it's like, ultimately, I think it's very rare to find somebody who is like 100% one way or the other. It's humans are complex and we're messy, and there's so much more, you know, to a human than any one thing. And again, that's the value in good stories and diverse stories, and in being able to really connect with a kindness, rather than looking for like, we're the good guys and who are the bad guys and we have to smite the bad people and all of that, you know, rather than opening up to the messiness and the chaos. And yeah, I just made a couple of notes too about like what makes for a good story. And again, a lot of this is just based on this book I'm reading. So character, and in brackets I put connection. Again, I think we're looking for that human connection. Change, so that sparks, you know, our interest when something changes. And he was talking a lot about just how the brain functions, and how like our eyesight, for example, we kind of tune out stuff that feels familiar. And if all of a sudden my cat came flying towards my computer screen, like that's like a big change, and it's kind of letting me know, like my brain would immediately be like, oh, something's changed, something's happening, and this is worth making note of. So that's something as well. Curiosity, so the change tends to spark that curiosity, and then again, cause and effect. So I won't go too much. I have like some quotes and stuff here that I'll toss into the show notes, but I won't read them all out here, just in the interest of saving time, because it is the evening and it's almost my supper time. And
my brain has just been slowly clicking off for the entire conversation. You know when you can actually physically feel your brain like
100%
not working anymore? Yeah, that's where I've been since the morning, actually.
Yeah, you can
I went through my entire workday like this.
Did you have a case of the Mondays?
No, it wasn't too bad. It was a little bit hard. I have like when I have a lot on my task list, I have a really hard time figuring out like, where do I even start? Because there's so many little pieces that I need to do that are kind of intertwined, and one is waiting for the other one, and that one's waiting for this one, and this one's waiting for that one. And so like trying to like figure out, okay, like I got to start somewhere. What can I start with? You get that kind of like decision paralysis thing.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I'm struggling with that right now with a bunch of tasks. I'm just like, I don't know what to do first. Which is, I think, why for so many years I've defaulted to just like practicing music, because it's productive, but it's like very clear because I've taken the time to figure out like exactly what I want to work on. Like maybe I should just do that with my tasks, but then the tasks are like exactly like you said, like everything's like connected and this and that, and you're like, I gotta do this first. There's something Seth Godin talks about in his book, The Practice, and I can't remember what he calls it. It's something like shaving a yak, but he's like, the basic idea is like when you have like a task and you keep tracing it back, you're like, okay, but I gotta do this thing first. okay, I gotta do this thing first. Okay, but I gotta do this thing first. And it's like playing like Skyrim or something, and you're like trying to do a quest, but you're like, I can't do this quest until I do this one first. And but I can't do this quest until I get this one. So it's like all these connecting quest lines. It's how like a task list feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except less fun.
Less fun, yeah. You don't get an achievement for that. You get not fired.
Yeah. That's an achievement.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Every day I'm not fired is an achievement.
Any final thoughts on storytelling?
No.
Yeah, I feel like we covered it all.
Yeah.
Or not at all, but a lot.
For sure. I'm excited to talk about some of our favorite
Me
stories.
too. Yeah, that'll be really fun. So yeah, the next episode 31, we are going to each share a few of our favorite stories. And also, I think that's the podcast where we will be doing a little like review or reflection on our Spotify playlist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so anybody who hasn't heard that yet, I will put the link again in the show notes so you can go check that out. There are 20 songs. I think the playlist is, maybe an hour. It's probably no more than like an hour and a half at most of just a mix of songs, 10 from each of us that we are just currently into. So go check that out if you want some new music to listen to. And then we'll just each, I guess, maybe share why we picked a song and maybe each share like a couple favorites or something from the list.
Yeah.
Any specific plans for the next couple of weeks?
Well, my acting classes start on Thursday.
Woohoo!
This Thursday.
Oh, that's fun.
Hopefully. I think the class, it's like there's 2 spots left, so I think they'll probably still go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, no plans. How about you?
More of the stuff I've been doing, just making all these, incremental positive changes. It's going great so far, so I'm just going to keep the momentum going. And you know what? One of the interesting things is that as I've cleaned up some of these things that have been hanging over my head for a while, I feel like I have way more mental capacity to think about other things. It's amazing how many ideas I've had over the last week, just now that I don't have these little nagging thoughts in the back of my head. Like, oh, you have to clean that filing cabinet out.
Yeah.
You have to do this. You have to do that. I've either done those things or I'm starting to go through the process of getting stuff cleaned up and organized and improved. And so it's like it freed up my brain to not have to worry. There's like a level of trust that this stuff is getting done. And yeah, it's sort of like, when you have a bunch of programs open on your computer and it's using up all the CPU. Like, I feel like I closed a bunch of programs and everything's running way better.
Yeah. I get that particularly with like digital clutter. Like, yeah. I like having, Speaking of which, that made me think I deleted my Facebook page.
Ooh.
Not my profile, but like I had an art page on Facebook that I never used. It had like 100 followers and I had a group in there that had a couple hundred people in it as well. But it's always been one of those things, like speaking of things in the kind of the back of your mind.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of there like, oh, I should close it. And because I keep hearing horror stories of artists being hacked and that they
That's
can't
huge
access
right
their
now.
Facebook page.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that kind of prompted this is I got a random message from someone asking if a piece was for sale. And like, I'll get this every now and then. They're always fake inquiries. Like they're trying to, because then they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I need you to like, there's a whole scam around it. I can't remember how it works. But I basically, it's like, if I don't recognize your name and I can't find you and I can't see that we have some sort of mutual connection, I just assume it's a scam.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this kind of gave like kind of scam vibes. And then I got paranoid. Like, is someone trying to hack into my account? Like, are they trying to see like how active I am so that they can, anyways, it just got me freaked out. And I'm like, you know what? I have been thinking about this for like 3 years, deleting this page. So I'm just doing it. And I did it. And it felt amazing.
Yeah. Take that, Zuckerberg.
Yeah. And at some point I will probably delete my Facebook profile as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason I'm hanging on to my Facebook profile is because I use Messenger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's me too.
But I don't actually use my Facebook anymore. And actually, like I have it. So on the rare occasion where I do need to go to Facebook for something, I have this plugin installed in Chrome that blocks the feed, like the Facebook feed. So it replaces it with just like an inspirational quote. So I don't even have to see what's going on. So it makes me so much happier to not have to be flooded with, I don't need to know what these people are doing. The people who I care about enough, like I know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I don't need to know what people I went to high school with are doing, who I'm never going to talk.
You wouldn't see it
again.
anyways.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't know how long you've had that plug-in for, but when I go on, because I sometimes will go on Facebook just to check out the community groups. But if I scroll down my feed, it's all ads.
Oh,
or suggested posts. Okay. Or like, it's rare that I see something from someone that I actually know now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've had it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you about the time somebody tried to scam me?
No.
Yeah. So this is just as the pandemic was starting. Everything was shutting down. And I was amping up like my advertisement for online lessons. And I had posted an ad up on the Toronto Kijiji. And I got contacted by somebody wanting, like, it was like piano lessons for his kid. This is what this guy was saying. And it was like, 3 lessons a week. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I'm like, first of all, like, that's a lot. Like, I've had people who want to do like 2 lessons a week before. That's not a super unusual. And especially if in some cases somebody is like getting lessons for a specific event, in which case then we'll do more. Like, that's not like totally unheard of, but it was a little strange. So, I just responded to try to get some more information. And then when this person responded back, and again, it's like the English was really bad, but I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt because I deal with a lot of people whose first language isn't English. And so like, again, it's like, okay, that wasn't setting off red flags, but the second email absolutely did. Cause he's like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the kid with a check, but there's going to be more money than you need to pay for the lessons. And so you send me the money back. I'm like, this sounds like a scam. And so I looked it up and it's called a tutor scam. And so what I did was first of all, again, this person was talking about, oh, we're going to be in your city. I'm like, no, you're not. It's COVID. So I just responded back saying, I didn't want to tip them off and be like, you're a scammer. Cause I wanted to be able to send a report and not have them I wanted to just knock them out. So I don't know if it actually did anything, but because they had contacted me through Kijiji first. So I responded to them saying, well, I'm not teaching in person right now. It's all online because of COVID. Like, everything's closed down. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know. I'm like, lies. But then I got in touch with Gmail and with Kijiji to let them know, like, this is a scam, blah, blah, blah. And then blocked this person. So I assume they probably took it down. But yeah, there's the one time somebody has tried to scam me through my music.
That's a classic one that people will use for commissioning art or buying art as well. That kind of like, we're going to overpay you. And then
just don't do that.
Yeah. It's pretty sad too. And I've had so many people reach out requesting art, but you can tell by the way it's written, like, so many messages where it's like, oh, I really like your artworks. Are they for sale? It's like, well, like, it's so vague and generic that it's like, yeah. The way it's phrased, you can tell that it's like, you haven't actually looked.
Yeah.
Like it.
It's sort of it gives off the same vibe as like some of those comments you'll see sometimes where it's like on a video and it's like, this is a great video, blah, and then it's like something for like something to try to make money. It's like, I made blah blah blah. It's like, you didn't watch the video, you're just spamming the comment section to sell your whatever.
I've probably had like 15 emails and messages through Instagram about like, oh, I really love your paintings. And like in brackets, like question mark. I have an anniversary gift to buy for my wife. I would like to buy 5 of your paintings. Like that's a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one goes around a lot within the artist community. It's so funny.
It's like, are you a Mormon and do you have 5 wives? Because that's the only scenario that makes sense to me for why you would want to buy 5 paintings
multiple
for an anniversary.
But then every now and then you hear from artists who are like, I thought it was a scam, but like they actually genuinely wanted 3 paintings. So I guess you kind of have to be it's kind of annoying. You have to kind of suss them out a little bit just to see like, are you legit or not? But last night I didn't have the patience. Yeah. And I tried to find this person's profile to kind of and I could not find their profile on Facebook. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are a real person and genuinely interested in buying, I'm sorry. but
can they get in touch with you through your website?
Yeah.
Or through an email or something?
Yeah, that's right. Might have been if it was a real person, I feel really bad because it's like
and they're like, I wonder if
we had this.
Yeah, I wonder if you saw my message and it's like deleted.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah, the page doesn't exist anymore. What?
Was I doing anything else? I'm gonna see you on the weekend for my birthday.
Yes.
But yeah, otherwise, work-wise, nope, that's it. So
Woo!
We're done. We did it. We made it. Nobody's brain completely malfunctioned.
No.
So yay us. There's an achievement right there.
Yes.
I should look for a sound effect. See if I can find like the achievement, the Xbox one or whatever, the Steam one. Yeah, because you and I both use Steam. I wonder if I can find that. Put that.
I don't even know what that sounds like.
I've been thinking about, I don't know, like looking into like adding sound effects or things. I don't know where. I don't know that this is that kind of podcast, but I'm just like really curious. Like I should
random.
I should put some fun sound effects or like little musical clips or something around. Because I've been experimenting with a little like transition music, but I'm like, it might be fun to add something somewhere. I don't know. I have all these splice credits. I'm like, I gotta use them up. I think I have like 600 of them. Like I need samples.
Maybe instead of editing out my ums, you can just cover up my ums with a sound effect.
Yeah. Probably people will think you're just cursing because that's usually what people do. Drop an F-bomb and then you get like a bleep. So every time you say just gonna bleep it out.
So
people are gonna think you're so foul-mouthed.
Well, it'd also be like really weird positioning for a curse word too.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Just in the middle, it's like it's like how hard is thinking for Robyn? She just has to swear right in between a thought and another thought.
Thinking is very hard for Robyn.
That's fair. That's fair. Anyways, thank you everybody for listening. Feel free to let us know about, I know we're going to be talking about our favorite stories in the next one, but feel free if you want to drop us an email or a message in the Discord about some of your favorite stories, let us know and we can read them out on the next episode.
Ooh, that'd be fun because I would like to know what kind of shows, video games, books, whatever that I should be reading. Yeah, definitely. Consuming.
Yeah. So yeah, please let us know. Or if you don't want it read out, you can just leave it in the Discord and just say, I don't want this read out, but this is like one of my favorite stories or whatever. And yeah, join our Discord because we have bonus behind the scenes stuff. So there are some like bloopers and some deleted scenes. Yeah, and stuff like that. So feel free to join the Discord. And you can follow us on Instagram. I keep wanting to say at Instagram because it's on Instagram at Stream of Art Podcast. You can send us an email to streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. Any of the other links are going to be included in the show notes. Just go there. And also, I think this week I'll be launching a Substack for the podcast. So if you would like email updates about when the episodes go live, you can go and check that out. I will put a link in the show notes and I will also put it in the Discord. So you'll be able to find it. It doesn't exist yet, but by the time this episode gets posted, probably Tuesday evening, it'll exist. And then you can sign up. And I think at some point too, we might do like bonus content, maybe. But we'll see. Anyways, I just wanted a home for our podcast and show notes to live. So yeah, check that out. And we will see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.